now. If you rent your home and you're worried about your job or you're already struggling maybe with the payments, what help and advice is out there? Well, Nick Sheridan is here to keep you on the right track. Hi, Nick.
Hello there, Martin. How are things? Yes, let's get straight to the important stuff and get it out of the way first of all. First of all, renters are not going to end up on the streets because of COVID-19. If in the last month you've received even a sniff, a hint of eviction from your landlord or your letting agent, you can point them towards this piece of legislation, which is the Coronavirus Scotland Act 2020. Now, these new rules mean in the majority of cases, landlords must give a minimum notice period of 6 months for private and social tenants, unless you have broken the law in the property or the landlord needs to move their family into it. It also means that if a landlord changes the locks, tries to physically remove you from the property, or makes life so uncomfortable for you that you have to leave, that they are committing a serious crime and they could face up to 2 years in prison. So these rules remain in place until the end of September, and in fact, they could be extended further. So the Scottish Government is hoping that landlords are going to be flexible with tenants struggling to pay rent because of COVID-19, especially since a week ago they announced an emergency loan scheme for landlords themselves losing out on rent income. So what help is there for tenants? Well, first of all, if you're struggling to pay rent, you can claim universal credit, which includes support for housing costs. If you still can't afford rent, then you might be eligible for what's called discretionary housing payment, essentially a top-up of that money. And if that doesn't cut it and you are facing an emergency situation, there is more cash available for people on low incomes from the Scottish Welfare Fund, details of which is up on the Scottish Government website. Now, say you're in the lucky situation that you are not facing eviction and you're able to meet your rent. So it's important to remember that your legal rights as a tenant still apply on top of social distancing rules. So if your landlord wants to visit you in the property, they can only do so if they are carrying out essential repairs to the property, to do an annual gas safety check, or to inspect the home for any repairs that are needed. And in all those circumstances, you still have the right to deny them access, which you might want to do if you are shielding or if you live with someone in a vulnerable group. So landlords and letting agents are still expected to fulfil their health and safety obligations to make sure that you can live safely and maintain mental and physical health in the property. So if your roof is leaking, for example, or if your boiler is broken, if you don't have any hot water, if your fridge or your washing machine conks out, or a window is broken, for example, in those situations, the landlord should still be meeting their obligations regardless of the lockdown, all the while observing proper social distancing guidelines. Now, routine certificate requirements like electrical fire safety inspections should be postponed, but gas safety checks should still go ahead. All in all, the Scottish Government is encouraging a frank and open conversation with their tenants about any issues to agree a sensible way forward, and links to organisations that can help you if you are struggling are available on the gov.scot website, Martin.
Great stuff, Nick. Useful as ever. Over the last few weeks, you've been giving us a whole lot of other useful advice about travel. Now, the UK government has issued new quarantine rules for people arriving in the UK. Presumably, that would apply to people who want to go on holiday. You go away, you want to come back at some point, right?
Well, yeah. Well, unless maybe you might not want to come back from holiday.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the unwise.
Yes, so these are basically new rules that are going to come into effect. They haven't come into effect yet. We're not quite sure when they are going to come into effect. Essentially, it would mean that anybody who is coming back into the UK would need to isolate themselves, put themselves under quarantine for 2 weeks, but not if you are coming back from the Republic of Ireland or France. So a lot of people are looking at maybe some attractive rates from budget airlines right now and are thinking, God, maybe I'll go over to Dublin or to Paris for a weekend.
And is that a good idea?
Well, I don't want to pour water on anyone's enthusiasm, but it is, it's probably sensible to remember that at the moment the Foreign Office is telling people not to go anywhere. Yeah. Obviously, a holiday is not essential travel. You are going to find it very, very difficult to get insurance as well. Even if you have an annual policy, a lot of them will not cover you for COVID-19 cancellations if you book it now. Just if you're going to take a risk, you should look at the cancellation rights with the airline when you book and see what you're entitled to, and you should book at your credit card or debit card to make sure that if the airline goes bust, you may well be covered.
God, sounds nice, doesn't it? Something to look forward to, isn't it?
Yes.
Nick, thanks as ever.
No problem.